Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today is the review so many of you have requested, Ultraviolence by Lana Del Rey. But first, how many of you are familiar with Hollywood director Sofia Coppola? The daughter of Francis Ford Coppola, she defiantly made a name for herself with an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay in Lost in Translation, which I most remember from an absolutely stellar performance from Bill Murray. But you know what? Ever since then, Sofia Coppola's movies have drifted towards a theme that she has explored time and time again: the hedonism and the existential emptiness of the idle rich. Now, this came up in Marie Antoinette somewhere, and most recently in The Bling Ring, and they get us hammered on these themes. And while each film is gorgeously shot, the framing of these movies has always kind of frustrated me, as that there always seemed to be an implied, attempted justification behind her protagonist's poor behavior that tended to feel fairly flimsy. Like Sofia Coppola, she seemed to show a lot of empathy for her characters, even when that empathy didn't quite feel earned in the script and the subtext. And you know what? I get the exact same feelings whenever I listen to Lana Del Rey. Like most people, I listened to her major label debut, Born to Die, in 2012. And like most critics, I wasn't exactly impressed with it. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either. Yes, the production was lush, and Lana Del Rey could create some very pretty and very opulent songs. But there was an air of artificiality and calculation surrounding every single song in the record. It didn't feel organic. From the arsenal of brand names to the completely out-of-place trip-hop elements placed inside to blend both old and new ideals of shallow wealth and success. And you know what? On a certain shallow fantasy level, it kind of works, but in an era where we have Vienna Teng, Fiona Apple, Regina Spektor, Tori Amos, Licky Lee, and Sharon Van Etten, amongst others, you're not going to convince me that any of this is soulful or deep. And you know what? It's not even a commentary on this sort of opulence in the vein of Lorde, but instead it's all framed as a glorification, a fantasy. And you know what? To be fair, I got the impression that this was Lana Del Rey's original intent. And you know what? Such a fantasy, it would be completely fine if there weren't some really troublesome narratives lurking underneath it, such as Lana Del Rey's obsession with glamorizing bad relationships, or the retrograde sexual politics that just got kind of disturbing in a few ways. And she didn't really step it up with the personality or wordplay to back it up. So when I heard that Lana Del Rey had written Young and Beautiful for Baz Luhrmann's version of The Great Gatsby, you know what? I wasn't surprised in the slightest, because like that film, it's a fusion in old and new flavors of glamour that misses the depth in favor of the spectacle. But you know what? Even if I were to give Lana Del Rey the benefit of the doubt and say that she was somewhat self-aware, her artistic framing certainly wasn't. Coming back to Sofia Coppola, yes, there's a reason I brought her up. There's shallow hedonism and existential emptiness in some of Lana Del Rey's songs, but it's framed as though we should empathize with the drama and the character that she presents, when the text and the subtext don't exactly support it. And thus, when she titled her most recent album Ultraviolence, I had no idea what to expect, especially considering that this album was mostly produced by Dan Auerbach of the Black Keys. But then again, since this album was requested time and time again, I decided to give it a very fair chance. What'd I find? Okay, this is going to be somewhat tricky, because I can acknowledge right out of the gate that Lana Del Rey's Ultraviolence, you know what, it's not for me on any level. And yet I completely get why so many people like and really love this record. But at the same time, this album is not good. In fact, it's pretty damn close to awful. Worse than Born to Die, in my opinion. Yeah, but wait, before you jump down my throat, let me explain why and try to keep this sane and reasonable. I've got nothing against Lana Del Rey personally or any of her antics in public, and this review is about her music, not her public persona. So let's just establish that right out of the gate. So before we go into going into this album in deep, let's talk about drama and melodrama. Now, both of them have their place in music, depending on the tone that the artist is looking to set. For drama to work, you need to have a conflict, a visible stakes, and a tone and context that can actively support it. If you don't have a conflict, if you don't have any stakes, or you've got an inconsistent or wildly exaggerated tone or context, you've got melodrama. And you know what? In pop music, that can work if it's framed properly. A good melodrama knows exactly what it is. It's self-aware, and it revels in the absurdities and extremes it can get away with outside of the genre conventions. Most notably, the excuse to just go over the top, which can work in pop music if you've got enough personality or you have enough flavor. Now, a bad melodrama, the type that the critics don't like but most audiences seem to adore, is when it tries to hide behind the tone of a drama, which can fool people into seeing depth when there really is nothing there, or worse, when there's something really kind of ugly beneath it all. So, okay, some of you are asking, why the hell is he bringing this up? Why the hell is he talking about this? Because on my first few listens, Lana Del Rey's Ultraviolence came across as a classic example of a really, really bad melodrama. A record that's trying to present itself as dramatic and deep, and yet fails utterly whenever you look at it deeper. So, okay, let's go piece by piece. What are the conflicts on this record? Well, the only track that gets close to Sofia Coppola's brand of existential emptiness and some empathy from me is Old Money, which is probably one of the better tracks on the album, even though it shamelessly steals the melody from that 1968 Romeo and Juliet movie that we all saw in junior high. The other songs often fall into the vein of pining over some guy that did Lana wrong, apparently, either by cheating in Shades of Cool and Sad Girl, or by his own vices and drug addictions in like Pretty When You Cry. Now, my go-to songs when talking about the other woman story, when done properly, are the timeless Reba McEntire and Linda Davis duet from 1993, Does He Love You, or I Know Him So Well from my favorite musical, Chess. And you know what, pause the video, go look those songs up, they're awesome. But in those songs, the two women seem to treat the cheating as an inevitability and spend more time addressing each other and the relationship itself and their own self-esteem rather than the guy in question. But Lana Del Rey frames her songs instead at the guy or at some sort of questioning observer. And in these songs, through her delivery and her lyrics, she's still quite clearly infatuated with the guy for no discernible reason, even though he treats her with obvious neglect, often very poorly, and there's no good reason to stick around. She should know better in these songs. There should be some maturity here. And what's worse is that she frames the songs as still being romantic and dramatic, when in reality, they just aren't. It just becomes uncomfortable here. And those are the songs where the conflict can be at least somewhat justified. Brooklyn Baby fashions the stereotypical Brooklyn manic pixie dream girl who's talking to an implied older gentleman at a bar whom she says she loves, which might be the departed Lou Reed, except you know the second verse implies a personality conflict and someone a little bit more immediate than that, even though she has a boyfriend plainly stated in the song. That same brand of teasing titillation comes back on Cruel World, where she seems to taunt an ex even while throwing out little enticing compliments. You know, if you're looking for songs that are just straight up power fantasies, here's one of the better ones, I guess. And then there's Money, Power, Glory, which, you know what, it could pass as a shallow bragging track interchangeable as any luxury rap on a hip-hop album, and you know what, might even have a shade of nuance in telling the guy to run away from her. And then you run into the line in the chorus, I want to take you for all that you've got. It's a really sour, unflattering expression of this raw greed. You know, it'd be excusable if the song did anything with it beyond cliches. I have no problem with the bragging, but brag better than this. And then there's Fucked My Way Up to the Top, a song that I initially thought was a sarcastic jibe at haters, until she fills the other half of the track with these cooing entreaties to the guys in question. Unless the guy is at the top, what use would he have for this song, as she clearly sees him as just another stepping stone to get to the top? And then there's the title track, which conflates sex with violence in a really uncomfortable way that sounds a lot less like a BDSM sex jam and more like an abusive relationship, with Lana Del Rey relishing every single hit. Yes, I know there's some extrapolation saying that it's about alcoholism and cultism, but it doesn't make the framing of the song any less unpleasant, or the implications any less questionable, or the fact that Sharon Van Etten did this very same type of song eons better with Your Love Is Killing Me on Are We There just a few weeks ago. It's done better, I'm sorry. So, okay, let's ask the bigger question here. Is this drama? Or is this melodrama? Well, some of that comes down to whether or not you can empathize with Lana Del Rey's character. And look, I really can't. Yeah, she's got a pretty voice, and she does a decent version of Nancy Sinatra's cooing sex kitten vibe, but her performance as a whole just comes across as incredibly underwhelming to me. She doesn't have Lord's poise and energy. She doesn't have Biana Teng's creativity and gift for natural harmonies, Sharon Van Etten's soulfulness, or Licky Lee's raw emotion. And she really lacks a lot of presence behind the microphone. especially in comparison with the more upbeat tracks on Born to Die. This is mostly because she spends much more of her time in this high cooing voice in comparison with her richer lower and mid range, and that's not counting the points where her voice just meanders through the tracks, either falling flat or sharp or descending in just an incoherent mumble that really isn't flattering. And as for the character that she creates, the lyrics give me no reason to care about her conflicts, because in all of her bad situations, she does nothing to change or react against them. And if there's supposed to be some greater nuance informed by her delivery to compensate for some of these thin lyrics or to justify some of her behavior, it doesn't come across here. I'm sorry. Now, granted, the production and the instrumentation do her no favors here. The richer orchestral arrangements and some of the hip-hop elements have been mostly stripped back in favor of a bluesy, indie rock-inspired vibe. And like too much modern indie rock, it's overloaded with so much reverb that the tracks feel suffocated. The melodies calling back to the late 60s and early 70s submerged and drowned out. And besides making Lana Del Rey's higher vocals sound even less substantial and often lost entirely in the mix, none of the dreariness has any real flavor or any real spark for me. I might like some of the strings arrangements. I always like it when organ crops up, and a couple of the guitar licks, they aren't bad, but they've got no weight and no presence thanks to this hazy production. It's instrumentation that's supposed to invoke some imagery of disaffection and distance. Okay, I get the production here, but it's not empty enough to imply loneliness, and instead creates a really drab feel to the melodrama that's put on display here. Because, okay, even if I was gonna say, alright, Lana Del Rey, she's not going for anything somewhat deep on this album, it's just snapshots of her life throughout the past few years. That's what she said. Let's see if we can capture some of that thrill and energy of those situations. It completely fails here because all these situations are painted in such a blurry, monochrome, disaffected shades. They lack anything close to visceral or real. Hell, even unreal to the point where they might provide some sort of catharsis or a cheap thrill or even much of a pulse. At least Born to Die had video games, national anthem, and the title track to give the album some sense of energy. And you know what? This could work if the writing or the delivery could actually back up the drama, or hell, even if the melodies or hooks were worth remembering at all. But every point where the momentum seems to build up, like on, say, West Coast, which began with a vibe that was strikingly similar to Pumped Up Kicks by Foster the People, but then the beat changes up for no apparent reason or just an attempt to be progressive. And you know what? The track just completely loses me, and it loses all of its momentum. Ugh, look, guys. I don't like Ultraviolence, an album that certainly does not earn its title, especially calling back to Clockwork Orange. I know that it's not for me, and if you're in the target demographic, you're probably going to like it or even love it on some level. But look, it's not good drama, and it's not good melodrama either. And when you have so many better acts that have released records in this vein over the course of the past year, there's no excuse for this. Because at the end of the day, this record is indulgent of Lana Del Rey's worst impulses, and it doesn't have the nuance in the delivery or the lyrical subtext to really step forward and back it up, no matter how many times you refer me to Rap Genius. Instead, falling back on a veneer of class that falls away the second you start digging deeper and asking questions. But you know what? Even if you pitch any ideas of authenticity completely out the window and you're just listening for the glamorous fantasies that she puts on display, I'm sorry, there's no pulse or energy to this melodrama. Lana Del Rey does not command my attention or really much of my interest, and her fantasies lack even the opulent descriptions and the flavor that they at least had on Born to Die. In short, this is a record that thinks and presents itself as a real Shakespearean drama, when in reality, it's a Twilight knockoff at best. For me, it's a 3 out of 10 and no recommendation. And before you get angry and sling fire in the comments, as you inevitably will, please, let me stress this. Go check out Ames by Vienna Tang, or I Never Learned by Licky Lee, or Are We There by Sharon Van Etten. If you're looking for compelling escapist fantasies with which you can actually build emotion and empathy, they're plenty better than this album. Sorry. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. As I've said before, on July 12th, I'm going to be reviewing an album from 2013, specifically on your request. So leave requests in the comments. This could be an album that I've already covered that you want me to re-review, with the exception of Cage Kill the Architect, or it could be an album that I missed throughout the course of 2013 and you want me to cover anyway. So this is your chance. Get those requests in the comments. If there's anything I may be able to do to improve my presentation, or if there's any other albums coming out this year that you want me to come up in the future, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. So until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.